Okay, it's time to do a little pen work now. I'm using Black Magic, which is a pigment ink. Um, it's more for drawing than it is for like calligraphy, but I use it for calligraphy. I'm using an ultra fine point. I'm trying to make sure not to get any drips or any heavy spots, but in the future you'll kind of see that it all turned fairly heavy handed. I use that color for the depth, and then I'll use pencil for the shallow. Just for the eye to reach into the color, there needs to be a starting point. And so some of this fine work is kind of like that in a way, is gives the eye a starting point to reach into and kind of fill in the blanks. A painting is still a painting. Um, anyway, you're just imagining depth when you look at a painting. The mind likes to fill in those blanks. So that's all we're doing. It's giving the recipe for the mind to fill in the blank through this practice. As I'm doing this, I'm trying to follow some of the natural highs and lows in the paint itself. And so at this point, kind of already predicted where these black lines are going to go in the work. Now I'll try to connect where I can, just using kind of a forward and then a downstroke. And it kind of leaves a ledge look. And that's kind of what I want to have here. And the more little fine lines I can get, the more they group together and look natural in a way. And when I do this pen work, I'll let my mind guide my hand, so to speak. And so I'll jump all over the painting sometimes and go here and go there. But a lot of times I'll need that other perspective to help fill in the blank on this perspective. So I'll work over here and it helps me gain balance on this side. And so I continue to do that. This is a process that does take quite a while. Once you get the pen out, you're going to be doing it for a couple of hours, probably. And here, just kind of starting to define the shapes and the mountain. Before they were kind of blended together, but now we're going to bring the line in that says this one is not that mountain and that mountain is not this mountain. And you have to think about how you want each mountain to kind of be different in a way, in order to produce the depth that you want to produce with it, just to give it perspective. It can be pretty flat until you get it not so flat anymore. And this is about, adding that third dimension, going from two, from just like a cartoon to something more realistic, at least. And even though this is more of a cartoony type feel to it, you still want your shadows to be where your shadows are supposed to be. So I use a piece of scrap paper sometimes just to kind of get the feel of how I want the ink to flow. I wasn't getting it to flow very well on that fine point, and so I went to a larger point, and this is when everything started to get a little Jackson Pollock-y. And at the end, I was pretty happy with it because everything kind of got a little too inky than the way I had originally thought of it. But at the end, I ended up using a lighter color kind of over the top, and it really made the painting. And so while I'm here doing this, I'm kind of not really super happy with how the ink is flowing today, or, is it my hand? Is it the ink? Sometimes I think humidity affects how ink will flow through one of the pen nibs. So again, just kind of experimenting, just kind of controlled chaos here of, can I make this move and look like a ledge on a mountain? And so I could, and I did. And once I went heavy-handed, there was kind of no turning around. So I want to warn you about that. That once you, say the fine lines aren't working the way you want them to, and then you go into heavy lines, you're going to have to stick with heavy lines after that. It's, just kind of how it is. So here I am putting heavy lines in. See right there. I don't know if you noticed that just a few seconds ago, but I had pulled across the point on my nib. Sometimes when you're working with paper, you'll get little paper threads in the slit of a nib that where the ink flows, and sometimes they'll just ball up, and instead of a fine line, you'll have a blob of a line. So every once in a while, you'll have to pull that thread, that paper, out of that nib. For me, I'm seeing a lot finer than you can see. The lines are taking shape and kind of are, even though you can't tell right here, they are kind of looking like ledges and starting to look the way I wanted them to look after it went heavy-handed. So I'll continue to go through all of it. And as you can see, my hand has gotten more delicate with the movements. I'm just doing what looks right. And for everybody, that'll be different. But then at the end of the day, my painting looks like mine, and yours looks like yours. And I just started connecting everything, I had all these ledges, and there's always a line reaching up the mountain if you look for it. So as you can tell by now, I've kind of accepted the fact of it's going to be heavy-handed. The original idea for the painting was of a very delicate nature, and I think I achieved that too, though. Even though some of that if I were to do it again. I want to find the right nib. Back to some fine lines. As far as this goes, this is about the time where I'm questioning when I'm gonna call enough ink, enough ink. And that's the hard part, right? Isn't it? When it comes to doing a painting, is knowing when to stop, knowing when to hold them, knowing to fold them. Now you can see that I brought in the. It's a very light blue. I barely put any blue in the silver on this because I want it to be really bright there. And I'm kind of scribbling it in. You know, it's heavy in spots, but then once you get a close-up look, you can tell that there are just kind of like squiggles around it, kind of blending it in. See, this is kind of the point where I feel like, you know, the hand of my divine self or subconscious mind or whatever shows up because I thought I'd ruined the painting with all that dark in there. I didn't know what I was going to do. And then I just took this blue and went over the top and brought it together again. But that's painting sometimes, is to bring it together again, you know? Sometimes it can get out of hand. And again, you know, just using a brush and a piece of paper to kind of make sure that when I put it on paper, it looks the same that in my mind it does. You know, that I can get those shapes and stuff. And, you know, for me, when I'm doing clouds, the drier the brush, the better. That was heavy there. I was getting ready to dip off some of that ink again, but here we go. Just keep going with it. Just little, few little threads stick out on this paintbrush, and I can use those as if like I had a handful of little pencils or whatever. And it puts just little bitty fine lines in this shape that I want. And I'm just going over the top of the clouds, you know, or wherever, you know, to give it dimension. I can even use that piece of paper to dry off some of the liquid if my brush is too wet. Now that my brush is really dry, I can go over it again and kind of just take away the sharpness of the lines and get them to look soft, because clouds can be very soft looking. And it has my patented 42 layers design. If you're not good at technique, you can always just keep adding layers until it looks like you have technique. And now I've gotten out the red ink by itself, and I'm just adding a few of the very, very fine lines in a couple of spots. And that really just says that this is the top of that peak of cloud. You know. And this is, you know, most of my paintings I would call whimsical. I like whimsy, and I like painting whimsy. I'm not really that. I've tried some realism in a way, but it never really, that's takes a lot of practice, time, and I'm just expressing an energy here. I'm just doing my best to um, point my wagon the right direction. So just a little bitty teeny tiny fine lines. I couldn't tell you if it's. I think this tip may make a quarter of a millimeter line. It's a very very fine line. All right, there it is. Here you go. Okay, the big reveal. Yeah, and see at some angles it goes completely silver. It's pretty interesting to look at it that way in the light. Okay, I'm getting ready. I'm going to go ahead and make the envelope. I kind of want to use this envelope as a standard size for this, or for paintings and things. It'll be a little bit wider, but at the same time, it kind of gives me an idea um, where I have to make my cuts, because I do have to cut this down. Um, it'll improve the painting quite a bit by getting rid of some of these edges that I don't know. I just didn't pay attention too much. I knew they were going away, I guess. So here we are. All right, here's the first cut. I'm just going to cut maybe a ½ inch off of this outside edge. And again, that helps the painting itself quite a bit. And cutting short on the bottom as well really helps cut out the stuff I would want to cut out anyway. See, I cleaned up that edge pretty good, and now it has a better depth to it. Now I'm just trying to figure out how much of that bottom part I'm going to take off, what lines to line up with. Gonna have to be more decisive with that knife. No, just crease it and tear it. Yeah, if I were going to frame this painting, I'd probably frame it, like that. Okay, just trying to figure out what goes on top and the back and what goes on the bottom. Am I going to use that as the flap, the pink side, or am I going to use the fireflies? Just kind of wrestle with it for a little bit, think about it. I want to remember that could go anyway. I thought about doing this one diagonal. Be a really long envelope. Scroll. Anyway, ain't nothing to do but just go ahead and make a crease. Yeah, here it is. Decided. I want to be careful and not to get creases. Paper can get creases in it, and once those creases are there, without steam and an iron or something, I don't think you can get them out. So it's best just not to make creases that you're not going to use on paper. Anyway, take the sides here and clean them up, get them square. Yeah, I was pretty pleased with it. Pretty pleased with it.